Okay, so since the last video, man, I want to try to remember where I left off. But I am going to go around this motor. As I told you, I was going to take everything off, so that way we can free everything up. And I went over the fundamentals of what you'd have to be concerned with as far as what's connected to the motor coming from the firewall to the block. So at this point, I did went ahead and take the fans out. There's just two screws. One right here, one right there, and then it literally just pops up. Obviously, you take the radiator hoses off. Shouldn't have to say that, but take the radiator hoses off, and then it just slides out. There is one wire harness. You stick a screwdriver on this side, slide it in, flathead, and there's a little pin that you press down, easily slides out, no big deal. All the rest of the wire harness comes out with it. That's the only thing you have to disconnect. Since then, let's see, we got the radiator that I disconnected. So you have the radiator harness is still connected to, the alternator. So you have the alternator harness is still connected. I saw that going out to the firewall back there, which is along the valve cover right here. So I just basically took the alternator away from the block, and I'll just disconnect that because that's just sitting on some screws that are acting like studs, just like these for the valve covers. So that'll just be set aside, and the motor should be able to come up and out. On the driver's side, the air conditioning pump down there has 3 bolts in it. I took all 3 bolts. That's what they look like. Took all 3 bolts out, and then there is another, I think it was a 5/8 bolts that bolt the other air conditioning line, or coolant lines to it. On the right hand side. Let me go up under there and see if I can put some light on it so you guys can see that. Okay, so now we're under the car, and that's the little box right here that I disconnected. You can see that screw right there in the center. That is the screw that, or bolt that holds it on, and that's what you want to take out. I went ahead and undid the screw right there where you see the nut is off right here. For the motor mounts, so hopefully the motor can come up and out instead of taking the motor mounts off of the block itself. Also, instead of taking the manifold off the block, I undid the screws, well, just above the catalytic converter over there. You got 2 screws. Hold on a second, I'm gonna go back up top. So as I was mentioning, you got 2 screws right above that oxygen sensor, and that oxygen sensor is gonna have to come out. And see if I can clear that up for you. That oxygen sensor right there, that's going to have to come out because it's connected to a wire harness, or it goes back to that, it goes back to this. So if you can unclamp that, then fine. You can take it off there, and then the oxygen sensor will stay on the manifold itself. But for me, I'm gonna see if I can jack the motor up and have more access to the oxygen sensor, and I'll take that out so that way nothing leaves the car and it stays in place. So the screws right underneath that, let's see if I put my finger right here, and there's one on the other side. It's what you want to undo in order to free up the manifold from the exhaust down there. Obviously it's on both sides. And so from that point on, what else did I undo? Oh, there is a ground back here where you see that bolt coming out. That's what makes this, it attaches to this bar, which goes into the side of the head. Let's see, on the top of the motor, I think that's all I've done so far. So now the rest of the day was spent taking all the bolts out from the oil pan all the way around up to the bell housing. So to give you an idea of what that looks like on the top, this is the new motor. So the top of the motor, you're gonna have 4 bolts, 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. That 4th one over there was kind of a trick to get out. That 4th one has a ground that goes to it, and it's also to give you an idea exactly where it is on the block, because you got to feel around for it. Sorry, my finger is all off. It's right there behind the transmission dipstick, or the transmission stick. So this is attached to it, or it's like a fork that goes around that bolt. These are the bolts that come out. So that's 1, 2, 3, and the other one I left down there because that's the 4th. And then you got these other bolts that are bolting this little bracket or something like that that's there to the block. So after you got those 4 out at the top of the block itself, you have to undo the oil pan, because the oil pan is sealed. It's not like a separate cover like on older cars that comes off, and then it exposes the what do you call that in front of the transmission, the the torque converter. So it's all sealed in one, so it'll continue after the block itself. So all of those are done, and this is the MDS solenoids, which is why I love this motor so much. I understand this solenoid is what allows the block to run as a 4-cylinder when you don't need the power, and a V8 when you do, which is the greatest shit in the world. Anyway, I saw a video where somebody was banging on this thing in order to get it out. I wouldn't do that. I understand they're pretty sensitive. This was relatively easy to pop out. As you see, they're pretty snug. So they've got 1, 2, 3 valves on there. But basically what I did was I took a flathead screwdriver, just like such, and I literally just went underneath it and just slowly pried it up, just like that. I just walked it up, and then eventually it just popped out. So I got the other 4 to do, and at that point, that's gonna free up the wire harness, because this goes all the way back. There's a little I don't know, like some little foam cushion or something like that that covers this, that's already been taken out. It just pops out, or you just remove it. And it's attached to this wire, this wire harness. So, wait a minute. No, it goes to another wire harness that's in the back. So you want to free that up. I did find out the problem. This motor did have the similar problems that almost all Chryslers have been having. It's a 5.7. So I don't know if you can see down in there. So if I can use you can see that ring right there that fell out of the seat of the head, and it's pinned between the head and the valve and all that. So I did discover that. As you see, all the rest of them, that's what it should look like, or just the focus, that's what it should look like. But that thing fell out in between there. It ain't supposed to be that way. So I wouldn't take a chance to rebuild a motor, because this motor was overheating, and I don't want to take a chance of, if that one happened over there, then it happened to another one, and going through all this shit in order to put it back together for the same problem to happen. So that's why if I'm going to do it, I'd rather just come and do it and be done with it. Otherwise, you got downtime, you got to take this thing apart, you still got to deal with the same amount of gaskets, you got to send it out to a machine shop, not going through it. So spend the money, do everything all at once, start from scratch like a new sheet of paper, be done. So at this point, I'm going to pop out the rest of these MDS solenoids and mark those. Matter of fact, probably don't even have to mark them, because the wire harness will kind of tell me where they're supposed to go, and it ain't that many of them. But anyway, for me, I probably still will mark it. But that is everything that I have done since last video. I'm gonna try to do this in segments and label them for those of you that are maybe into it and don't need to watch, I don't know, like some hour-long video in order to figure out what to do in order to get this motor out. And you can just go straight to the video that you do need. So at this point, the next video should just simply be me probably pulling the motor out and going over it.